welcome to my channel. Merry Christmas, or Bar Humbug if you prefer. Today we are going to be turning the Bar Humbug upside down and we are going to be celebrating Christmas and making some DIY handmade gifts for your friends, families, loved ones this year. So if you want to see how I made any of these gifts, keep watching, and I'll also be putting up more Christmas gifts and DIYs over the next few weeks. So if you haven't already done so, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the like button, that would help me out very, very much. With all of that being said, is it time we get into these gifts? Yeah, let's go. So the first gift I want to share with you today is this personalised monogram floral letter in a frame. It makes for a lovely personal touch, and I did make mine with an H on it so that I could keep it. I do have friends, but I just really wanted this one, so let me show you how I made it. For this project, you'll need one of these clear glass frames with the 2 panes of glass, but if you don't have one, I'll show you a second option with a regular frame in a minute. You'll also need super glue for that option, and you'll want some pressed flowers. I did buy these online. I normally press them myself, but we don't have very many colourful flowers growing at the moment, but you could do this with some lovely winter leaves and twigs and florals and things like that. So as you can see, I'm just arranging the shape of my letter first before I glue anything down to make sure that all the colours are evenly distributed and that the arrangement is how I'd like it to be. Then with a delicate hand and a little bit of patience, I used some tacky glue to glue them all down in place, only a tiny bit at a time, and then once it was dry I sandwiched it together and put it back in the frame. It is so very simple, but it's a lovely customized gift for a friend, especially a friend who never gets their name printed on anything, like myself. If you don't have one of those glass frames hanging about, you can always do this with a regular frame, as long as the frame itself is very wide and the glass behind it will sit comfortably behind if you glue the frame to the glass. Use super glue for this and let it dry overnight, and then you can attach your flowers to the front of the glass and then just glue them down. This one's a bit more delicate, but it's still got the same effect. Once you're done, you should have a present that looks something like this. It's just a nice little personalized gift that's very easy to make, and I'm sure someone would like it. Someone who likes flowers anyway. That DIY was actually so simple and easy to make, just like this next one as well. It looks complicated, but I promise it's not. I'm going to be showing you how to make a hand crocheted cushion. You might remember I did something similar to this last year when I made a scarf. It is exactly the same technique, so if you struggle in this video, maybe I explained it better over there. I'm not sure. Who knows? I'll find out when I'm editing, but it's a very simple project and it doesn't take long at all, and it's made with love. So let's jump into it. Here comes the section of the video where I get really tongue-tied trying to explain something. You'll need a really chunky ball of wool and your hand. You might need more wool than you think. I ran out, but I'll show you what I did later. So make a slip knot to start by taking the end of the wool and crossing it over. Pull the loop over the top and the working wool through the loop. Pull it fairly tightly and then slip this loop over your hand like so. Then you're going to take your hand and grab the working wool and pull it through the loop. You're going to do this repeatedly to make your chain. Keep doing this until you have as many loops as you want to create your chain based on how big you want your cushion to be, and this is going to depend on how chunky your wool is too. To create your second row, you're going to want to take the loop that you've just made and put your fingers through the top of the loop next to it and pull your working wool through. Keep doing this along the top of your chain all the way to the end. Don't worry, I'll show you a close-up in a minute, because if this sounds complicated, I promise you it's not. It just takes a little bit of time to get the hang of it. It does help when you get to the end of your piece to flip it over and keep repeating the pattern in the same direction that you're going in from the one before. This way you get into a rhythm and it's really super easy. Here's a quick close-up, so hopefully you can see which loops at the top of my piece I'm pulling the working wool through to grab it with my hand. And when you do run out of wool and you want to attach a new ball, all you have to do is take it and tie it in a very tight double knot. Once you've worked that into your piece, you can then cut the ends and sort of tuck it away so you can't tell that it's even there. Keep going until you get to the desired length for your pillow, and then we can work on closing it all together. So here is me the next day after having a minor breakdown because I'd worked very hard on this and I thought I had enough wool. It turns out I didn't, and Aldi aren't currently selling this super fluffy wool. So the original plan was to fold it over and use the working wool to kind of tie the pieces together as I'm showing you here. Literally, I'm just using the wool to go through each loop and kind of stitch it like a running stitch together all the way around the sides. I would have then stuffed it with pillow stuffing, but as you can see it was very small and I wanted a much bigger cushion. So what I did to overcome this problem is I took a cushion base and then I unraveled a lot of my hard work. That was painful, and I got it to the size where it kind of matched the cushion, maybe one chain slightly bigger. And then I literally just snipped the excess and I sewed it onto the cushion. Make sure to tie this off very tightly first in a nice double knot so that it's not going to go anywhere. And then you can use a needle and thread, and literally because this wool is so nice and thick and chunky, I was able to thread the needle through the wool and onto the edges of the cushion. And this was pretty seamless actually. And you know what? I've given this cushion to my nan. She uses it in the evening on her footstool. So I'm glad it's gone to good use. Anyway, this is how the cushion turned out after my slight upsets. Let me know if you make one of these. On to the next one. I'm going to show you how to very easily upcycle a boring craft box and turn it into something a little bit more handmade for someone who loves their jewellery. So you'll need a plain jewellery box for this. You can get these in the craft store. They're very inexpensive. I think this was $1.99 from the works. And I'm using some polyurethane varnish for this as well in a dark stain colour. And we've also got some pink velvet for the inside, just for a little pop of colour. So I just started by putting my stain on top of the box, using a foam brush to make sure there weren't any streaky lines going through it. And I ended up having to do about 3 coats of this, but it was worth it. Once it was dry overnight, I was then ready to get on with the next part of the project, which was the little inserts for the rings or for the earrings, whatever you're going to put in here. This would make a really nice gift box if you're actually giving someone some jewellery as well, so there's an idea. Anyway, I'm just cutting a long strip of the velvet based on the size of the box. I'm kind of eyeballing this, to be honest, because we're going to want to make this ever so slightly bigger than the inside of the box anyway. We're going to snip the ends, so don't worry if it's not perfect. But what you're going to do is you're going to start rolling the velvet until it's about the size that you'd like, and then you can mark where you're going to cut it, cut that little section, and then you can use this as a template to cut more of these small pieces of fabric. Once you've cut them all out, you want to roll them up again and use a little bit of hot glue to secure them at the ends, and then cut them down to size. Like you can see here, they were a little bit bigger than the box because I wanted a little bit of extra fabric to play with, and I also wanted to cut nice clean edges. Then you can go ahead and stick them to the bottom of the box. As you can see here, I'm just rolling, gluing, and then gluing them into the box. And this is quite a relaxing craft project, really. Once you've rolled them all up and stuck them in, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. And for a fun twist on this project, you could do this in a small cosmetics case to make a portable travel-sized jewellery organiser as well. For my next project, I wanted to do some resin crafts. I've actually made a video all about how I use resin, and I've been trying to perfect my technique over the last few months since posting that video, and I wanted to make some very dainty, delicate key rings and necklaces for my friends, so I made a few of those. Please remember when working with resin to do so in a well-ventilated space with a mask, wearing gloves when you're using the resin, and don't do this around children or pets, please. But I'm using a 2-part epoxy resin, some silicone molds, and then some little bits and pieces to put inside the resin like tiny dried flowers and glitter, a little bit like I did in my resin video, but I feel like I've sort of perfected my technique and I've figured out what I really like. I love the teeny tiny dried flowers, and with every piece I make, it's starting to get a little bit more polished, if you know what I mean. So here I'm making some hair clips, which I've never made before, and I'm putting a really large flower in to make one long piece and then a few tiny ones. So once I did that, I mixed up the resin, just a tiny amount of resin, and I did two different things here. In this crescent moon, I tried to put the resin on the bottom before putting in the objects, and then I encased them in resin. But with the hair clip, I just poured the resin over the top. If you're doing a much larger project with lots of teeny tiny fiddly things, you might want to do a thin layer of the resin just to make sure there are no bubbles. And then I was ready to let them cure overnight for 24 hours. The next day I was able to add the finishing touches. For the hair clip, it was super gluing the grip onto the back of the clip and leaving that dry again overnight. This isn't a very quick last minute craft compared to the others, but it's well worth it, so I would recommend doing this a good couple of days in advance. And then we just had the key rings to make, so I opened the jump rings using some jewellery pliers and threaded those through the hole. This is how they turned out, and I really think they were so much better than my previous attempts in the summer. I love this little crescent moon with the flowers, and I really like how the hair clip turned out as well. With that project over, I had out all my resin making silicone molds, and I thought, why don't we try and make one of these with the concrete? So let me show you how that turned out. So you'll need the silicone molds, as I mentioned before. These ones are quite small, but they worked really well. And you'll also need some concrete. I could only find exterior powder filler. This worked, it just took a little bit longer to dry, but I would recommend concrete because we know that works. And but this worked too. It's all about trial and error in this DIY game. Mix up your powder filler or your concrete or even plaster of Paris with some water. I'm using the tears that I have cried over all of my failed projects, including not having enough wool for my cushion. Anyway, mix it up until you get the right consistency. I had to keep adding a lot of the filler because I wanted it to be not quite like peanut butter, thicker than yogurt, kind of like a McFlurry. That's what we're going for. And when you've got that McFlurry consistency, pour it into your mold. I'm using a lolly stick, popsicle stick if you're American, to really get it down into the bottom of the mold to make sure that there's no air bubbles or holes. And I just kept adding a very small amount at a time and brushing it around, and then I tapped the silicone mold onto my work surface multiple times. As you can see, those little bubbles popping up, they're from the bottom of the mold, and we want to get all of those out. And then when it looks fairly smooth, you can put it to one side and let it dry. I'm also doing one in this hexagon shape, which I think worked pretty well as well. I took the circle one out the night before from the mold, and I'm demolding the hexagon one the morning I'm filming this. As you can see, it looks like it's not quite dry, but it is dry. It just needs some time to be out of the silicone mold to get rid of a little bit of that moisture. So the other one had a bit more time to dry out. So once that was done and I'd left it dry long enough, I just used a little bit of fine grit sandpaper. That's not fine grit, that's 80 grit. What am I doing? Oh no. Please use fine grit sandpaper and just very gently buff off the edges, and you should have something that looks a little bit like this. You could then paint these or gold leaf them if you want, leave them plain, but they make great little catch-all dishes. You could do a little succulent in one of these if you drill a hole in the bottom, or you could even put a candle in one. So yeah, they're really easy to make and you can make a lot of them very inexpensively. So with that project done, that brings us to the end of today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it and it gave you a few ideas for some personalised Christmas gifts this year. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Happy DIYing, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you next time. Bye.